Well, it's my great pleasure to have Hori Paora with me here today. And Hori was known to me when I first met him as George Paul. And Hori and I are both from New Zealand. And the circumstances under which we met were commercial high, well, not exactly high dodgery, but it was certainly some interesting commercial stuff that was going on. We were pushing boundaries. And Hori was the business manager for a very, very, very successful medical business in New Zealand, in Auckland. And we met with some other people who were, going in some pretty interesting directions. And it was an interesting time. So this is a long time ago. This would be the end of 20 years ago that we met. And since then, we've maintained a good friendship, not necessarily, very close over, all of that time, but certainly it's been a close friendship. Hori is actually sort of comes from an area just a little bit north of where I grew up, and sort of a farming, coastal sort of interaction type of a place. So, Hori, I wonder if you could actually just introduce yourself a little bit and talk, briefly, about your origins and how you got into, the business where we met, and from there on we can, move forward and have a look at the, the questions around how you actually find self-determination, and how you can really, manage and learn from experiences in life that haven't necessarily been that happy or that comfortable for you. So, welcome.
Hi, thanks very much, Neil. As you mentioned, I'm from New Zealand, and I'm from the east coast of the North Island, a place called Te Kaha. And for those viewers from overseas, that is away from New Zealand, you would most likely understand where that is relative to the recent eruption of White Island, which was an unfortunate incident of recent times where people were killed on the island just outside of Te Kaha. And as it was growing up, depending on which way the smoke was coming out of White Island on the day would determine whether it was going to be a good day where it rained or not. So that's interesting in that respect. I got to meet Neil, like he was saying, but even more than 20 years ago, where I'd become involved with a friend of mine from Australia and a surgeon, where we started the clinic there, and was something that I had grown in terms of my entrepreneurial desires from a relatively young age, because although I'd gone to university, I didn't take that to the full term. I just began to try different things out in the big wide world. And fast forward to today, I've had some ups and downs across the journey from the 10 or 15 years that we ran the clinic successfully in New Zealand and branching out to Malaysia and Australia. But in terms of self-determination, during the course of that journey, I had taken my eye off what had initially been a great passion of mine, and that was to grow the business to be very successful, which it happened to be. But towards the last few years, I had looked at developing other things. So my passion had been diluted. And as a result of that, my personal circumstances changed, and I ended up leaving New Zealand, making the decision to do that, leaving behind my relationship and the business completely, arriving in Australia with only $500. So my mindset had changed quite considerably, and I had to endure, is probably the right word, many, many years of trying to rediscover what I thought was the most important thing, which was what I'd experienced before. I hadn't actually grown in any way, any meaningful way, as I look back at that. And just as I'm saying that, I can best describe it perhaps as, since leaving New Zealand, it's been like a funnel of thoughts. My determination is coming down to this present moment where I'm having more control, or I feel as though I've got more control or a more positive approach to where my future is going to be. So does that make sense when I'm saying?
Absolutely.
I'm more purposeful in the way that I'm looking to move forward.
Yeah. So, what I'm hearing you saying is that the success that came from, your tremendous endeavours, and I'll definitely, support you in this. You put some serious energy and effort into the success which the clinic became. And, but what I'm hearing you saying is that when, for whatever reason, as it was beginning to no longer actually satisfy you, it still was the only thing that you could look back to as being, there's George being successful, and so therefore I want to recapture this. And what you're really talking about now is that there's a re-examination going on, and you're actually saying, well, was I really self-determined at that point, or was I following some kind of agenda that really wasn't my own agenda? So, perhaps you could just actually have a bit of a look into that. Just actually talk a little bit about, what would be the agenda for yourself, like whether you're thinking of yourself as Hori or as George.
That's actually a good question, because what springs to mind immediately is the situation back then was very much related to money, because there was lots of it. And at that stage, I had interpreted that as being successful. And at the present time, while I do acknowledge that, and that's, that is certainly uppermost. Well, not uppermost, it's up there in terms of the things that are important to me at the moment, because that allows you a certain flexibility in doing the things that are really important to you, and giving you the options to do the things that you want to do when you want to do it, with whom you want. And that's part of it. But there's also the most important part, I think, which is the nourishment or the fulfillment part of doing something purposeful and really satisfying to the soul, I guess, is the way I can best describe that. And while I fully haven't determined exactly what that is, because I feel strongly that were that to be the case, if I could bring that into perfect focus, then all the wishy-washy things that come along and distract me when I'm trying to move in the direction that I feel is purposeful, then that would make things like too easy, because I know exactly where I'm going. I know exactly what I was needing to do in the moment to ensure that I arrived at what I was focusing on. So the idea of that self-determination and focus, I think, is the one thing. And I'm moving to that with the intention of getting to that moment of full realization and self-determination, which I feel would come together all at once. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Look, once again, what I'm actually hearing you saying, and I don't know if this is sort of between the lines a little bit, but what I'm hearing is that it's like a process of finding yourself. And so, you're repeatedly over and over and over tackling these business opportunities and things that you can do with the intention, like it's a clear intention. I, like to make a bulb out of this and be successful and help a lot of people as well. I don't want people to go away with the idea that you're only actually motivated by money, because I know you have a huge heart.
Oh, no.
You're really intent on helping people. But it's connected. It's connected to this idea of being a successful person. And what I'm hearing between the lines is that where you've been going with this journey is actually that the journey is sort of meandering around this to the point that you're actually, starting to really the focus is about finding Hori. That's becoming the focus. And in so doing, there's a flowering. And I just wonder, like, as I say, like, you correct me if I'm wrong with what I'm saying, but that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. And if that is the case, then what are the lessons for people who are watching this? What are the lessons?
Well, what popped into my mind there is unintended consequences. And what I mean by that is, whilst I've been looking to get to the physical trappings of success, the money, the physical things that you can buy with it, I've tried many different things, but in retrospect, my heart hasn't been in it. And by trying, like, I genuinely mean that, I know in my mind that the way that I can achieve that to be really satisfying on not only the physical level of receiving money, but to do that, I've got to serve people, and to serve them from a place where I am genuinely satisfied by providing the product or service to them, and they are they're just so grateful for the service. Money doesn't, in that equation, money doesn't really come into it, because it's such a genuine exchange of value, more than the exchange of money. Like, it's a it's almost like a revelation in terms of what changes in terms of what they receive and what I provide. Now, I've been able to provide different services over the years, but as has transpired, when my heart isn't totally in it, it seems to ultimately blow up because there hasn't been that genuine exchange. It hasn't been the situation where I've actually fallen in love with what I'm providing. And that's a situation. And as I say, the unintended consequences of not providing something that's genuine, something that you really are devoted to, love dearly, would actually give it away freely, were it not for the fact that realistically, at the moment, you do need to provide for yourself and for your loved ones in terms of being able to get monetary reward for the service or products that you provide. Yeah. Is that, and just as an aside, that unintended consequence I was talking about, that over the years has become more and more clear about the way that I'm moving, and I'm just noticing an actual subtle but meaningful change in what happens with what I'm doing. And as I'm doing what I'm doing now, that feels a whole lot different to what I was doing, 10 years ago. And it feels, way better. And progressively over the years, the different things that I've tried, it gets a little better, but now it seems to be gaining some positive momentum. And having said that, I'm not absolutely sure, because I mentioned before about the focus. I feel as though I'm getting closer to that. In a sense, it's like the focus on my spiritual and mental camera is slowly being, wound in, or it's becoming more clear. It's being slowly dialed in, and I think maybe that's determined by the intent of everything evolved around what I'm concentrating on at the moment.
Hori, yesterday or a couple of days ago, I interviewed a coach from Scotland, and she was talking about fundamentally what you're mentioning here, these unintended consequences, and it's the process of the lessons that are being delivered up. So she was talking about trauma that goes on in people's lives, and there can be the gentle drip 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 type trauma, which is what you've been experiencing, trying to re-establish what went before and that type of thing. Or it can be something horrific, like it could be horrific experiences that go on in people's lives. But what she was talking about was this repetitive nature of it until you learn. And so what I'm wondering is whether what's been happening for you is that it's taken a period of years, decades perhaps, to actually get to a point where you're actually recognizing these unintended consequences. I think it's a great term that you're using there. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. Like it's a feeling thing rather than a knowing thing, in terms of reading the recipe of life and saying, well, you do all these things and this is the end result. It's just that I feel that there's a change, and I know that this is, there's been a change. Like I feel it in my bones in terms of what I'm moving towards. Now, there is some expectation I have of putting the end result in front of me about what I'm doing at the present time. And I feel as though that's right. I'm not necessarily deluding myself to believe that because I've determined that's what it is. And although I want it to be the right thing, and it feels it's the right thing, it's not as if it is unequivocally the right thing that I know in my heart of heights. That's where I've got to go. It feels almost like it is. So the experience of moving towards that is part of what will be ultimately, I feel in my mind, that it's going to be the total recalibration to know that, yep, there it is. You know, it's like I'm having a shotgun approach to where I'm going rather than a sniper's target where he knows exactly where it's going. I know I'm getting close and moving in the right direction in terms of using that shotgun to hit my target. But as I'm coming closer, I'm going to be recalibrating my intentions and focus and actions so that the ultimate outcome will be I will smash that target because I'll know everything about it. I'll be able to see it. It'll be an absolute focus, and there's going to be no other result, that's ultimately where I'm looking to be. And I know I'm definitely in the right frame, in the right direction, in the right intent, and that recalibration could be perhaps interpreted as, and to some degree, some form of determination, a recalibration, a refining, a refocusing.
Yeah. Now, Hori, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about your experience of being led towards something as opposed to, sort of forcing yourself in a direction. So I'm kind of hearing with what's gone prior to recent times that you've actually felt forced, or you've had to force yourself. And the difference between that and that experience of actually being led by, by what's come to you, really. So,
yeah, it's a fine line, I think, between being forced to go because of understanding at the moment where I have lolled about both LOLL and LWL for years instead of going on a focused and determined path. I've been led by I'm trying to look for the right words. I've just been led by slothfulness, just been too lazy to even struggle to find what was there. And in that struggle, as I said, that the struggle has been really to determine what is purposeful, what is the most meaningful for me in my life, and that's been really hard. I mean, what's my passion? What's my purpose in life? That's a question that I've struggled with. And will you be fortunate or open enough to receive that idea, then everything becomes easy. And in that sense, you could be led by the idea and you could follow with the idea, where in my situation, I haven't had that experience. So what I've done is force myself to try and do the things that I felt or that I know previously that I've done, where you improve your self-talk, improve your actions, positive thoughts and affirmations, visualization. And the struggle has been because I haven't had that that end focal point of where I want to go. Then I've had to force myself to do things that realistically in my heart I know that I've really just got to fake it till I make it. And that's taken all of these years. And not that I'm saying that it's been a total waste of time, but it's just been a process that I've gone through. And at the present time, I'm more focused on that to improve the speed at which the outcome is achieved. Does that answer your question, or does that give some?
Yeah, and certainly, you know, that's how you're approaching it, which is really good. You know, I've said to you before that I still haven't worked out what I'm going to do when I grow up, and you know, so, and I've got to a place now where I'm not particularly concerned about it. So I know I'm a generalist, and you know, I'm relatively good at a lot of things, and I can just sort of roll along. And you know, the fundamental stuff that you know that I do is to help people to try and wake up. So you know that's where the main impact is. But in terms of what I'm doing for a living and that sort of thing, it's almost become irrelevant, you know, to me. That being said, though, you know, these issues around self-determination and being, you know, not totally at the mercy of things is important too. But equally, you know, for myself, it's been a lot of stuff around learning to accept what's going on too. So, you know, being able to be in the flow of what's happening. And the interesting thing is the self-determination actually comes out of being in the flow as well. So, you know, these things aren't, you know, as you're answering the questions, you know, like you're demonstrating that they're not, it's not A plus B equals C. It's some whole other kind of alchemy. No, not. Yeah. And you know, like yourself, and I've experimented with being around tremendously large amounts of money, and I've experimented with sleeping under a tree, you know, while the snow's falling. And I know having some money is more fun than sleeping under a tree while the snow's falling. And you know that's just the reality is that it's more comfortable. You're less lost in your own craziness and that type of thing. But there's some kind of balance, you know, in terms of commercial success versus, you know, complete poverty, as I've certainly experienced. So what you were talking about there before is like a period in your life where you kind of went into stasis. So, you know, you were talking about it as being like a lull in your life, and you're determining that it had sloth or laziness or something like that associated with it. And you know what I'm interested in, like when we talk, you know, which as I say, it's not that often, but when we do talk, I always get this energy of things on the horizon, and that there is purpose going on. And you know, I'm just very interested in how that gets maintained in the everyday life, you know, so life with family and you know, that type of thing, and making a crust and all the rest of it. How does this bigger purpose you know, get maintained, or what part of you maintains it?
Wow, that's a big question. One thing before I try and answer that, you mentioned before self-determination and flow. In my mind, which it's like the cart before the horse, which comes, or the chicken and the egg, which comes first? Because certainly I know what that flow state is, and it's unbelievable. It's great. And I've been there before, sometimes not knowing how I got there. And the self-determination side of things is where you intended to be there and got there, which is great. Other times you get there, don't know how, and then you realize you determine how it's been there. So it's great on both sides. So I don't know what I'm saying there, but it seemed at the time that, wow, I'd never looked at it that way in terms of being in flow. But that's certainly one of the places that's an unintended consequence of when you focused on what you really want to do, and you have got that all figured out, on the way to getting there, you will just naturally be in that flow state. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, the self-determination and how to maintain that, I think as you become, or as I'm becoming more focused and aware of what happens when I do certain things, I've set out certain tasks and certain targets for myself, like very, very small targets, like putting out the rubbish or going for 5 minutes exercise when I haven't done any exercise for a few weeks, then doing 10 minutes. So it's a progressive thing of having little targets or goals for myself to achieve. And even in terms of the practice of reading, reading either a new book or parts of the Bible, to feed myself with what I know is good nourishment for my mind and my soul, because that's part of the process to achieving the ultimate things created by my self-determination, as it were. To maintain that, I've realized in only the past few weeks, and it's a very clear realization, that the determination that I am meaningfully moving towards comes about through habit. And it is the creation by myself of good habits on a consistent basis that are going to, without question, enable the outcomes of self-determination and that supreme focus. I think that's what I'm talking about in terms of achieving the outcomes which I desire. Does that answer the question?
Well, that's very good, very good. Take me to the transition points. So, many people have experienced great success. So, like, I'm not necessarily saying this is in your case, but this is experience that people have often, is that they have very successful relationships where everybody's deeply in love with each other and they're looking after families and doing all of that kind of stuff. And then a transition occurs and it all turns to custard. And in people's lives generally, if you look about yourself and what's going on in your community and so on, you'll see many examples of this where there is being flow and like concerted energy and concerted focus around an aspect of the journey, and then it all falls apart. So like there's a transition process, and like in your life you've had a number of transitions. Talk me through your understanding of how those transitions actually occur. Like what is it that's come in or has left to actually sort of point you in that direction, and indeed whether anything should be done about it or not. Is it natural for these transitions to occur?
I think when I look back at those times of transition, the uppermost feeling is a feeling of, very definitely in my case, is the feeling of selfishness, where you focus intentionally or otherwise on certain things in what you do or where you spend most of your time, being self-indulgent, and especially in regard to relationships, and both from my experience, business, family, and personal close relationships. In those three instances, from my experience, that has been it's been not the straw, but it's been the log that's broken the camel's back, where it's been an entire process of increased self-indulgence, but in the business sense, in that sense for me, where I was entirely focused on that rather than my family or my personal relationship, that over time there was no other outcome than for everything to break up from, from a business point of view, in the instances where, and to date that's been all of them, where they haven't continued in the ideal situation for a business relationship, the outcome of which is the end of those business relationships. It's been where either one or both of the parties have taken their eye off the ball, where there's been no commonality of purpose. And just in a personal sense as well, in terms of even the things that I do where the outcome hasn't been great, is where I've moved my focus from what I know to be good to something else, which is, it's not good. So it's where I've indulged in self-indulgence of a thought away from something that I should have been focused on. Or I know that's good, but I've done, for whatever reason. Now, that's a summary of it, where I've been self-indulgent. I've just focused on what I want without consideration to other people, and the result is being the absolute decimation would be the ideal word in terms of those relationships. Although on the family front, and even on some relationships, should I say, recognition of where that has been disastrous, that you can still, with the right intention, rebuild those on an even stronger footing, which is very satisfying and very rewarding in that case. There you go.
Yeah, no question about it. Where this is leading is that what you're talking about, and there's not too many people who come on an interview and be as honest and open as you're being with us. So thank you. But where we're going with what we're putting together with this project, particularly the Togetherment projects and the Future Link projects and that type of thing, is getting to a place where people are completely self-responsible, so that each person takes responsibility for themselves utterly, absolutely utterly. Now, that could look from the outside as being selfishness. The people are self-indulgent and they're selfish because it's all about them, until you look a bit deeper. And inside of self-reliance is actually an immediate flowering of concern for the environment. So concern for everybody around you. So as a natural consequence, so like this is an expected consequence that we're talking about now, of becoming deeply self-reliant, is you immediately are caring for your environment. You immediately have care for everybody around you. And the natural thing to do then is to actually form communities, is to form, whether it be online communities or whatever it is that you do, families or whatever. So that's kind of interesting, like, what you're talking about there. So how would you view, like where you are at the moment in terms of that, that view of where the self-reliance goes? Like how would you actually connect those dots up?
Um, I the self-reliance and self-determination, if I could put it this way, it does comprise that self-indulgent element, but it is more, when I look back at what I did, it was purely to satisfy me with what I was doing, with no consideration in any way, shape, or form of anyone else. But I wasn't aware that that was the case. I just did it at the time, thinking that that was what I wanted and needed to do in that moment, which was a continuous period of time. As I see things now, that is or can be a positive thing when you're moving towards something that or as a result of which, to achieve the ultimate goal, you cannot help but to serve others, because in fulfilling that promise of where you want to go, there is an unintended consequence again of helping others. So self-reliance, in essence, you can't exist without other people. And as we are, or as we're taught, or as we are led to believe, we're social creatures. And interesting, I was reading, this is an aside, about the blue zones around the world where people live, well into their hundreds, healthily. One of the most important criteria of attaining that level of longevity is the social nature of what they do. They have great relationships and family, they've got friends, they spend time with them, and interestingly, they don't go on diet. That's just an aside. But that's just to qualify the point of how social we are as creatures and as a species. So the process of being self-indulgent towards something that ultimately will nurture you and be the ultimate state in which you will enjoy absolute joy for your existence. I don't feel as though you can actually be there without serving other people in one way, shape, or form. You would be giving away some of your inherent truth and value, because what you have in abundance in that situation would be the sustenance that someone else, who would be your audience or people that you would need to serve, that's what they need in their lives to be complete at that point in time. I mean, that's my interpretation of the question, and that's my answer. There we go.
Yeah. So tell me about avoidance. So, you've been talking about going and, trying the same thing over and over and over again, despite the fact of not really believing it. But, for whatever reasons, you're sort of drawn to continue. But what's the role of avoidance in all of this?
I'd have to say I've graduated with honours in terms of avoidance and procrastination. And I don't know the full answer, but having been the black belt in that area, it is something that I think just came out of habit. Like, you know, if I didn't want to, well, it's not as even that I didn't want to do something. If the situation come up where I wanted to do something, which I knew was going to be, that it was going to be good for me to do a particular task or to read a particular book or to do certain exercise or whatever. And without undertaking that, you know, whatever I wanted to do, knowing it was good for me, without undertaking that, you know, within 2 or 3 seconds, my brain or whatever fed into my brain, there would be certain other things that would come up. And I said, and I just make the choice. Well, I thought I would make the choice not to do the good thing. And after viewing what had transpired, I think, oh, crikey, why did I do that? But then something else would come in. So you have a busy mind with all these trivial things coming up, like, you know, watching something on TV when you know that's an absolute waste of time, watching the news, especially in recent times, watching everything about COVID, about this and that and whatever. But it's almost like a vortex, which is, just sucks you into that, you know, all that stuff, so to speak. So it's just not having a strong enough goal or purpose that would draw you towards it sufficiently that it would overcome those initial bad habits of the thoughts that pop into your mind that take you away from what you know even is good for you. So the way that I'm overcoming it at the present time is I'm more intentionally focusing on reading better material, spending time doing nothing, you know, like meditation, or focusing on stillness, on gratitude, the things that I know that are good, but genuinely focusing on the intent of completing the task, whether it's just a 5-minute meditation or reading just a paragraph of the Bible rather than I'm going to read, you know, a whole chapter or I'm going to read a couple of pages. Just taking baby steps towards achieving what I know is going to be beneficial for me. So the process is to do very little easy things to do so that they become the default pattern in my mind. So that's my approach to what you can do. And I've seen pleasingly positive results because I've undertaken these sort of situations in the past. And the way that I can look at it is it's almost like trying to lose weight, which I've done many times over the years, sometimes with some success, but ultimately ending up in a yo-yo diet where you put the weight back on and all that, until was it 2 years ago where I received a letter from my doctor saying I was pre-diabetic. So in that moment, for whatever reason, something changed in my mind that I now look back on and say, well, that was a good thing. Something shifted in my consciousness, and that was that I didn't like the idea of becoming diabetic. And I didn't like the idea that I was so big anyway, because I had a positive reference in my mind about what I felt that I looked like. But having received that letter, I knew that I didn't look like that person that I had in my mind. So the combination of the fact that I didn't look like that, I didn't want to have diabetes, and the ultimate, the end game of that scenario was you will die before your time without fulfilling the things that you know that you're here to do. So in that moment, I changed the trajectory of my weight future. So I undertook certain things that changed, allow me to lose 4 or 5 stone, which is 30 odd kilos, a lot of weight. It wasn't overnight, but over the past, it's been 2 years or so. I don't have that extra weight. I've got the enthusiastic nod of approval from a doctor saying you're in good shape. All your markers are in perfect alignment, which is what we want to see. Keep doing that. So in that sense, having seen that and experienced it, I know when you've got those things that move the needle in your mind, build the intent. I mean, you just burn with desire to get a change. You want to effect positive change for yourself, and doing the things that you need to do along the way. There was a number of things that I needed to do to get there. Like when you fast, doing that, undertaking that regimen with intent, without experience from before. You have to have, there's some faith that you adopt or have with the hopeful outcome. But the focus of where I wanted to go, it was unquestionable. So in my mind, I was already there. It was all these things that I had to do. So in retrospect, that was a great, wow. that was a great thing. All I need to do is to replicate the circumstances around seeing that unequivocal outcome. Wow. There you go. I think that's the answer. Where how you get to where you want to go when you don't really know where you want to go. An outside influence or something triggers the flow-on effect of all the things that you recognize need to happen for you to achieve what it is that you truly want to achieve.
Well, my namesake Gurdjieff, he famously said, you can't get out of prison until you realize you're in it. And it's not possible to get out of prison until you realize you're in it, I think was his wording. And what you're talking about there is that there was a biological consequence. Some people would say unexpected consequence with obesity and that type of thing. And exercise profiles and all the rest of it. But you needed to know that you were in the prison. You actually had to see the bars. You had to actually recognize the bars. And having done that, you could then take steps. There was things that you could do to actually get yourself out of that prison. And, a lot of the things that you've been talking about, with your business exercises and stuff to do with families and that type of thing, has been a process of recognizing, the prison that you're in as well. So like, just the business of being the difference between being self-responsible, so in other words, caring for yourself, and the difference between that and being self-indulgent or selfish, poles apart. They're poles apart. But unless you can see that prison, there's no way you can get out of it. It's not possible.
Ain't that the truth?
So you've got a life of consequence that actually follows on from it. Very interesting. So tell me, you're here at this stage in your life and you're working with all of these things and where you're going. If you had a magic wand, I often ask people this question: if you had a magic wand to wave, what would be the outcome of your magic wand?
Oh, that's an easy one. I would love to know what it is that I know is my ultimate goal. It's the thing that would be, it's the answer you'd give is, what is your purpose in life? Or what is your burning desire to achieve? What is your, what is your major life purpose? What is your big, hairy ass goal? All of those things in one, what is that? Or even better than that, what is the easiest way to determine what that is? Because it's like the idea of when I realized that I didn't actually like where I was. It was like almost like the analogy of boiling a frog. I was putting on so much weight, so much weight, without actually, it may seem silly, but without realizing it until I got that letter. And that absolutely brought it into immediate focus, which triggered all the other things that, that obviously were in my mind about being way too big. You're wearing clothes that's 4 sizes bigger than I am now. There was just so many things. So when you come to that realization from so many different directions in your physical sense, in your mind, in your heart, it just comes together just like in an instant. So that would be the thing with a magic wand. Absolutely. Because I know when you're there, man, the rest is just, it's just a pleasure walk in comparison to the outcomes of the alternative.
Sure. But look, there's without a doubt, as you know, like I'm not telling you anything you don't know already, but while you were still big and you were bending over trying to tie up your shoelaces and you couldn't get to the shoelaces, you knew that this was a big goal that was sitting there. So like there was an aspect of you knew it. And just now what you're talking about, like these big life goals for yourself, like what these big life goals are, you know the answer to it. Like you're already struggling to tie those shoelaces, if we extend the metaphor. And I know Jill Cundiff, who I interviewed, who's a very interesting coach, she would say to you that it's all about what are the emotions that are sitting under it. What's the emotion stuff? What's actually sitting under it? What's sitting under it? And I'm sure you'll find the answer.
I love the analogy with the shoelaces, because I can even picture myself doing that when I was at that stage. Not that I wore shoes till very later on in my childhood, because back in those days I remember having to walk to school across the paddocks and in ice. Shoes were a luxury back in those days, but absolutely, most certainly, I definitely remember having I'm going to do that. Not right now. As I'm reliving those moments, I was shown that this is what you do. I could see tied shoelaces around. I just couldn't do it at that time. But I just kept on doing it. Tried different ways of bending down to do it, because I felt that if you were really close, you could actually see what you're doing properly. Oh man, absolutely perfect analogy, perfect. So, and the idea that you mentioned about asking the emotional questions there, I'm certainly aware of the process, but I've always defaulted to the fact that I think it's better when someone else who knows the right questions to ask to prompt something in me. So although I can ask some questions, I've always felt that there's better questions, and I don't know those questions, so I give up. I default to the, oh, it's too hard, I'll try something else.
Okay.
I may revisit that situation.
Interesting. We'll keep an eye on this space, as they say. So, Hori, look, thank you so much for talking to us today, and it's been a real pleasure, and very, very interesting to hear your story. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. It's been enjoyable. Thank you very much.